The wagon lurched to a stop, wheels groaning against frozen mud. Clara Malone pulled her worn wool shawl tighter and peered through the canvas flap. Bear Claw Ridge sprawled before her like a scatter of wooden dice thrown by a careless hand, rough-hewn buildings hunched against the Wyoming wind, their unpainted boards already graying with age and weather. "This is as far as I go, ma'am." The driver's voice cut through the whistling cold. "Trail's too rough past here, and storm's coming in." Clara gathered her single carpet bag and climbed down, her boots crunching on frost-brittle grass. The November air bit at her face, sharp as broken glass. She pressed $2 silver into the driver's palm, half of what she had left. "The hunting station," she said. "Which way?" He pointed toward the mountain rising like a white-capped giant beyond the town. 4 miles up the old logging road. But ma'am," he glanced at the darkening sky, then back at her thin coat and city boots. "That's rough country. Maybe wait till spring." "Thank you for your concern." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I'm expected." The driver shook his head but said nothing more. As his wagon creaked away, Clara stood alone on the muddy main street of Bear Claw Ridge, aware of curious eyes watching from behind frost-etched windows. A woman traveling alone always drew stares. A woman headed up the mountain in November drew worse than stares. The general store stood across the street, lanterns already glowing warm behind its windows, though it was barely past noon. Clara crossed, stepping carefully around frozen puddles. The bell above the door announced her arrival to a room thick with tobacco smoke and the smell of pickle brine. "Help you?" The storekeeper barely glanced up from his ledger. "I need supplies for the journey up to the hunting station, and proper boots, if you have them." Now he looked up, taking in her travel-stained dress, her neat but tired appearance. His eyes lingered on her bare ring finger. She'd sold her wedding band 2 towns back for food. "Hunting station's been closed since October. Early snows drove everyone down." Clara's stomach tightened. "That can't be right. I have a letter." She fumbled in her bag, producing the crumpled paper. "From Mr. Theodore Ashford. He hired me as cook and laundress for the winter season." The storekeeper squinted at the letter, then handed it back. "Ted Ashford lit out for California 2 months ago. Heard he had some trouble with creditors." He studied her with something between pity and calculation. "You come far?" "Chicago." A low whistle. "That's a hard piece of traveling for nothing." "You got people here?" "No." The word sat heavy in the cold air. She had no people anywhere now. Not since James had sent her away with nothing but coach fare and a note that said a man couldn't build a life with a woman who wouldn't hold her tongue. Even his mother had agreed. Clara was too forthright, too unwilling to play the gentle flower a banker's wife should be. "Well," the storekeeper scratched his beard. "Martha Henley might need kitchen help at the boarding house. Course, she don't pay much." Clara straightened her spine. She hadn't come this far to wash dishes in another woman's kitchen, to duck her head and make herself small again. The letter had promised honest work, good wages, and most importantly, solitude, space to breathe, mountains between her and everyone who thought they knew what kind of woman she should be. "The boots," she said, "and provisions, dried beans, salt pork, flour, coffee if you have it." "Ma'am, you can't mean to—" "How much for a week's supplies?" He named a price that would leave her with $3. Clara nodded and watched him gather goods, each item a small act of defiance. When he produced a pair of men's boots, the smallest he had, still too large, she put them on without complaint, stuffing the toes with the newspaper. Outside, the sky had darkened to the color of old pewter. The first snow began to fall as Clara shouldered her provisions and started up the logging road. Behind her, she could feel the town watching, waiting for her to turn back, waiting for good sense to override whatever foolish notion had driven her this far. But Clara Malone had been sensible once. She'd married properly, kept house properly, held her tongue when her husband's business partners told crude jokes at dinner. She'd smiled when she wanted to speak, nodded when she wanted to argue. made herself smaller and smaller until she'd almost disappeared entirely. The day James had ordered her out, the day she'd finally told his mother exactly what she thought of her precious son's gambling debts, Clara had felt something crack open inside her chest. Not breaking, breathing. The road climbed steadily, winding between towering pines that blocked out what little light remained. Snow fell heavier now, already obscuring her footprints. The carpetbag grew heavier with each step. The boots rubbed blisters despite the newspaper padding. But Clara kept walking. 3 miles up, she found the first trail marker, a wooden sign half buried in snow. Ashford Hunting Station, 1 mile. Her lungs burned with cold air and exertion, but she pressed on. The trees thinned as she climbed higher, giving way to a meadow where the wind hit like a physical blow. And there it was. The hunting station huddled against the mountainside, a main lodge built of massive logs, 2 smaller outbuildings, all of it looking abandoned and forlorn under its blanket of snow. No smoke rose from the chimney. No light showed in the windows. The front door hung slightly open, creaking in the wind. Clara stood in the failing light, provisions weighing her down, snow gathering on her shoulders, the promised job, the promised shelter, the promised new beginning, all of it as empty as the buildings before her. She could go back. Town wasn't so far. Take that kitchen job, make herself useful and quiet and small again. Instead, she walked to the lodge and pushed inside. The main room stretched before her, a massive fireplace at one end, rough tables and benches, cooking area to one side, everything covered in dust and mice droppings. But the roof looked sound, the walls solid. In the cooking area, she found matches, oil for the lamps, even some tinned goods left behind. Clara Malone lit a lamp and surveyed her kingdom of abandonment. Then she rolled up her sleeves and got to work. She'd survived a marriage that tried to make her nothing. She'd traveled half a continent alone. She could survive a winter in an empty lodge. As she swept mouse droppings from the hearth and laid her first fire, the storm outside grew into a proper blizzard. The wind howled around the corners of the lodge like a living thing, and snow began to pile against the windows. But inside, Clara's fire caught and grew, pushing back the dark. She was alone, truly alone for the first time in her life. No husband to appease, no mother-in-law to placate, no society to satisfy. Just her and the mountain and the storm. For the first time in months, Clara Malone smiled. She'd make this place livable. She'd survive the winter. And come spring, she'd decide what kind of woman she wanted to be when no one was watching, when no one could tell her she was too much or not enough. The storm raged harder, sealing her in. Somewhere in the whiteout darkness, wolves howled, lonely and fierce and free. Clara added another log to her fire and began making her supper. Tomorrow she'd explore the other buildings, take inventory, prepare for the long winter ahead. Tonight, she'd sleep in a place where no one could find her, where no one could tell her to be quiet, be good, be less. She didn't know that miles above, in a shelter carved from the living mountain, a man sat listening to the same storm, didn't know that tomorrow he'd find her tracks, follow them down out of curiosity about who would be fool enough to climb the mountain in a blizzard. Didn't know that Elias Rourke was about to walk into her solitude and change everything. But tonight, Clara Malone was alone and unafraid, and that was enough. That was everything. The fire crackled, the storm sang, and high on Bear Claw Ridge, a woman who'd been told she was too much began to discover she was exactly enough. The sound woke her, not the wind, which had howled all night like a wounded animal, but something else. A deliberate sound, heavy footfalls on the porch boards. Clara sat up in the nest of blankets she'd made near the dying fire, her heart hammering. The oil lamp had burned out hours ago. Only ember light remained, painting the lodge in shades of red and shadow. The footsteps stopped at the door. She reached for the fire poker, gripping it tight enough to hurt. The door, she'd wedged it shut with a chair, but the wood was old, the latch broken. if someone wanted in badly enough. The door pushed open, scattering her makeshift barricade like kindling. Snow swirled in on a gust of bitter wind, and with it came a shape that filled the doorway, tall as the frame itself, broad as a barn door, covered in frost and fur. Clara scrambled to her feet, poker raised. "Stop right there!" The figure paused, then stepped into the ember light. A man, though he looked more bare than human in his massive coat. Ice crusted his beard, turned his eyebrows white, but his eyes, dark as coffee, steady as stone, fixed on her with an expression she couldn't read. "Put that down before you hurt yourself." His voice came out low and rough, like it hadn't been used in days, maybe weeks. "This is private property," Clara said, not lowering the poker an inch. "You're trespassing." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his weathered face. "That's so." He pushed back his hood, revealing dark hair shot through with premature gray. "Ted Ashford give you the deed. Did he?" "I work here. I'm the cook." "In a closed station, in a blizzard." He stepped further inside, and Clara retreated until her back hit the wall. He was enormous, not just tall, but built like someone who'd spent a lifetime wrestling mountains into submission. "Ted's been gone 2 months. "I have a letter." "Ted couldn't write his own name if you spotted him half the letters." The man moved to the fireplace, ignoring her raised weapon. He pulled off his gloves, hands scarred and capable, and held them to what warmth remained. "You came up here alone." "That's none of your business." Now he did look at her, really looked. His gaze traveled from her tangled hair to her men's boots, taking in the travel-worn dress, the shadows under her eyes, the white knuckles gripping the poker. Whatever he saw made him frown. "Storm's getting worse," he said finally. "This place won't hold heat with that door broken. You'll freeze by morning." "I'll manage." "No." The word came out flat, final. "You won't." He turned and walked back out into the storm. Clara stood frozen, poker still raised, listening to his footsteps fade into the wind. Her hands shook, from cold or fear or anger. She couldn't tell. Who was he? What did he want? Should she try to run? Before she could decide, he was back, carrying an armload of split wood. He dumped it by the fireplace and went out again. 3 more trips, wood, then tools, then a heavy pack. Each time, he ignored her completely, working with the focused efficiency of someone who'd done this too many times to count. "What are you doing?" He pulled a hammer from his pack, along with leather hinges. "Fixing the door, unless you want to sleep with wolves." "There are wolves." The look he gave her could have meant anything. He set to work on the door, movements sure despite the dark. Clara watched, torn between demanding he leave and desperate gratitude that someone, anyone, had found her. The poker grew heavy in her hands. Within minutes, he had the door rehung and solid. Then he turned his attention to the fire, building it up with practiced ease until real warmth began to fill the room. Only then did he shrug out of his massive coat, revealing clothes as practical as they were worn heavy wool shirt, canvas pants, suspenders that had seen better decades. "You got food." Clara bristled at the assumption. "I have my own supplies." "Not asking for charity. Asking if you're stupid enough to come up here without provisions." "I'm not stupid." "Jury's still out on that." He pulled a packet from his packed dried meat, from the look of it, and set about making some kind of trail meal. Clara finally lowered the poker, though she kept it close. In the improved firelight, she could see him better. Younger than she'd first thought, maybe 35, but worn down by weather and solitude. A scar ran through his left eyebrow. His hands, she noticed, never stopped moving. Cutting meat, feeding the fire, checking the door. "Who are you?" He glanced up from his work. "Elias Rourke. I keep a place further up." "I keep a place?" "Hunting, trapping, minding my own business." He paused, gave her a pointed look. "Usually." Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the fire. "I told you, I work here. I was hired." "You were played for a fool. Ted Ashford would promise his own mother to anyone who'd pay his bar tab." Elias poured water from his canteen into a small pot, set it on the fire. "Where'd you come from?" "Chicago." He whistled low, same as the storekeeper had. "Long way to come for nothing." "It's not nothing." The words came out fiercer than intended. "It's work, honest work." "In an empty lodge that won't see a soul until spring." "If then." He studied her with those dark eyes. "What are you really running from?" Clara's spine stiffened. "I'm not running." "Sure you are. Women like you don't come to places like this unless they're running hard from something worse. Women like me. City women. Soft women." His gaze flicked to her hands, already blistered from the day's work. Women who never built a fire that had to last all night or butchered their own meat. "I can learn." "Not in a blizzard, you can't, not alone." He added something to the pot-dried herbs. "Maybe." The smell made Clara's stomach clench with hunger. "Got people in town?" "No." "Anywhere?" She lifted her chin. "That's not your concern. It is when I'll be the one finding your frozen body come spring." The casual brutality of it hit like cold water. Clara pulled her shawl tighter, trying to reclaim some dignity. "I appreciate your concern, Mr. Rourke, but I'll be fine." He snorted. "You don't even know how much wood it takes to heat this place for one day. Your fire was already dying when I walked in. Another hour, and you'd have been too cold to start it again." "Then teach me." The word surprised them both. Elias stopped stirring his pot, looked at her with something that wasn't quite suspicion. "I'm not leaving," Clara continued, meeting his gaze steadily. "I have nowhere else to go, and I won't go back, so either let me freeze or show me what I need to know." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the fire's crackle and the wind's howl. Finally, Elias pulled the pot from the fire, poured its contents into 2 tin cups. He handed her one without a word. The brew was bitter, medicinal, but it spread warmth through her chest like liquid fire. Clara cupped it gratefully, inhaling steam that smelled of pine and something wild. "Can't stay here," he said finally. "Lodge is too big, too drafty. Take too much wood to keep warm." "Where, then?" He jerked his head toward the storm. "Got a place, smaller, already supplied." When she hesitated, he added, "Or stay here, your choice, but I'm not coming back down to bury you." Clara looked around the lodge, at her pathetic pile of belongings, her meager fire, the drafts already sneaking through gaps in the walls despite his repairs. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. "Not anymore. Let me gather my things." He nodded, finished his drink in one long swallow. While she packed, which took pitifully little time, he banked the fire and secured the lodge. When she emerged with her carpet bag and provisions, he took them from her without asking, adding them to his own pack like they weighed nothing. "Stay close," he said, leading her into the storm. "Step where I step, and whatever you do, don't let go." He handed her a rope, one end tied to his pack. Clara gripped it like a lifeline as they plunged into the white world outside. The wind hit immediately, stealing her breath, driving snow into every gap in her clothing. She couldn't see more than 3 feet ahead. Only the rope and Elias's broad back kept her moving forward. The journey became a nightmare of cold and stumbling. Her feet went numb in the oversized boots. Her hands cramped on the rope. Once she fell, and he was there immediately, hauling her up with easy strength, brushing snow from her face with surprising gentleness. "Not far now," he said against her ear, voice barely audible above the storm. Not far turned out to be relative. By the time they reached his shelter, a low structure built into the mountainside itself, Clara could no longer feel her face. Elias half carried her the last few yards, shouldering open a heavy door and pulling her into blessed stillness. The space was small but warm, smelling of wood smoke and leather. As her eyes adjusted, Clara made out a single room carved partially from living rock. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, already glowing with banked coals. Furs covered the floor. Supplies lined shelves cut directly into the stone. It was primitive but solid, a fortress against the mountain's fury. Elias guided her to a stool near the fire, then knelt to pull off her frozen boots. His hands were careful but impersonal, like he was tending a lame horse. Clara's feet screamed as feeling returned. Frostbite? She looked down at her white toes, terrified, but he shook his head. Just cold. Lucky. He rose, shrugged out of his pack. There's stew in that pot. Eat while I tend to things. Clara wanted to protest. She wasn't helpless, wasn't a child, but her hands shook too badly to hold a spoon. She sat humiliated as he moved around the small space with easy familiarity, adding wood to the fire, heating water, laying out blankets. When he finally stopped moving, he pulled up another stool and studied her with those unreadable eyes. Clara braced for questions, accusations, demands. Instead, he said, "You can sleep when I'm done with you." The words, delivered in that low rumble, sent an entirely different kind of shiver through her. But before she could respond, protest, question, anything, he continued. "Need to check those hands for frostbite. Feed again in an hour. Make sure you eat everything in that pot, then sleep." He stood, towering over her in the small space. "Questions can wait for morning, if you're still alive." It wasn't a threat, just mountain truth, hard as granite. Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. He moved away, giving her space, and she realized with a start that despite everything, the isolation, the storm, this strange man's presence, she felt safer than she had in months. Safe enough, finally, to eat, to let him check her hands with those scarred, careful fingers, to wrap herself in the blankets he provided and close her eyes while the storm raged outside. Her last thought before sleep took her was that she still didn't know what he'd meant by his words, but somehow, inexplicably, she trusted that morning would bring answers. In the corner, Elias Rourke sat watch over the stranger who'd walked into a blizzard rather than go back where she came from. He'd seen that kind of desperation before. Usually, it didn't end well. But something about her, the way she'd faced him with that poker, chin up despite her terror, made him think maybe this time would be different. Maybe. The wind howled, the fire crackled, and two strangers waited out the storm, each nursing wounds the other couldn't see. Clara woke to the sound of purposeful movement and the smell of coffee. Real coffee, not the bitter pine brew from the night before. Gray light filtered through a single window, revealing Elias crouched by the fire, feeding it with methodical precision. "Storm's past," he said without turning. "For now." She sat up, muscles protesting. The small shelter looked different in daylight, more cave than cabin, with tools hanging from pegs driven into stone, furs and supplies stacked with military neatness. Everything in its place, everything with a purpose. "Here." He handed her a tin cup, steam rising like a prayer. "Drink, then eat." The coffee was strong enough to strip paint, but Clara had never tasted anything so welcome. She watched him work, slicing bacon, mixing batter with economy of motion, no wasted effort, no unnecessary words. "About last night," she began, "what you said meant what I said." He flipped bacon without looking at her. "You want to survive up here. There's work to be done. Teaching you takes time. My time. So you can sleep when I'm done with you." Understanding dawned. Not a threat or proposition, just mountain practicality. He'd teach her what she needed to know, and rest would come after. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks at her initial assumption. "I'm a quick learner." "We'll see." He slid a plate in front of her. Bacon. Flapjacks. More food than she'd seen in days. "Eat everything. You're too thin for winter. She bristled. I'm perfectly... You're city soft and mountain stupid. That'll kill you faster than cold. He fixed her with that steady gaze. First lesson up here, pride's a luxury. You survive by knowing what you don't know. Clara bit back her retort and ate. The food was simple but good, and her body craved every bite. Elias ate with the same focused efficiency he brought to everything else. Then began clearing up. Second lesson, he said, handing her the dishes. Everyone works. No passengers on this mountain. She washed while he laid out supplies on the rough table rope. Flint, dried goods, tools whose purpose she couldn't guess. When she finished, he motioned her over. Fire first. Without fire, nothing else matters. He showed her how to bank coals, how to judge wood by its weight and grain, how to split kindling with economy. His hands guided hers on the hatchet handle, correcting her grip with impersonal touch. Like this, let the weight do the work. Clara tried again, managing to split a piece cleanly. A small victory. But Elias just nodded and moved on. Water next. Creek's frozen, but there's ways. He taught her to read ice, to find the spots where current ran beneath, how to break through safely, haul water without soaking herself. The day progressed in lessons, how to read weather and cloud formations and wind shifts, how to set a simple snare, how to move in deep snow without exhausting herself. Elias taught with sparse words and endless patience, correcting without criticizing. Why are you helping me? Clara asked during a brief rest, hands raw from practicing knots. He considered the question longer than seemed necessary. Maybe because you didn't ask for help, just ask to learn. That's all? That's enough. By afternoon, Clara's body ached in places she'd forgotten existed. But when Elias showed her how to skin a rabbit, he'd snared. She forced herself to watch, to learn, even as her stomach turned. Can't be squeamish, he said, hands swift and sure. Everything up here lives by taking life. Plants from soil, deer from plants, wolves from deer. We're no different. I've prepared chickens before. This isn't your kitchen in Chicago. But his tone held no mockery. This is survival. As shadows lengthened, he taught her to read the signs of coming weather, to secure a shelter against wind, to never go out without telling someone you're wrote. Common sense to him, revelation to her. You've lived up here long, she asked, watching him repair a snowshoe with nimble fingers. 8 winters. Alone? His hands stilled briefly. Mostly. Clara waited, but he offered nothing more. She understood. Some stories weren't for sharing with strangers. Last lesson for today, he said as darkness crept in. Night's different than day. Sounds carry further. Cold bites deeper. Never go out alone after dark. Not until you know this mountain like your own heartbeat. And how long does that take? Some never learn it. Some are born knowing. He studied her in the firelight. You may be somewhere between... After dinner, a stew of rabbit and roots that tasted better than any Chicago restaurant. Elias pulled out a worn deck of cards. Know how to play? Poker. Cribbage. Poker's for fools and cheats. He taught her the game with the same patient precision as everything else. Clara found herself relaxing, even laughing when she managed to win a hand through sheer luck. You're holding back, she accused after he let an obvious play slip by. Maybe. His eyes held that almost amusement. Or maybe you're learning faster than you think. As the evening wore on, Clara felt the strangeness of it all, sitting safe and warm while winter howled outside, playing cards with a man who'd been a complete stranger 24 hours ago. She should be terrified, should be planning escape. Instead, she felt settled, like she'd been holding her breath for months and could finally exhale. I should tell you, she said suddenly, about why I came here. It's only fair. No. The word stopped her cold. Elias gathered the cards with deliberate movements. Don't need your story. Don't want it. He looked up, meeting her eyes directly. Everyone comes to the mountain carrying something. Some come to find, some come to lose. Either way, what matters is who you are now, not who you were down there. But you want to tell it for you. That's different. But don't tell it for me. I've got no claim on your past. Clara felt something ease in her chest. James had always demanded to know everything, where she'd been, who she'd talked to, what she'd thought about. This gruff stranger offered her something she'd never had the right to her own secrets. "Thank you," she whispered. He shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we work on shelter building. Need to know how to make a snow cave that won't kill you." Clara rose, then hesitated. "Where do I—" He gestured to the pile of furs near the fire. "Take those. I'll be fine over here." She arranged the furs, softer than any bed she'd known recently, across the small space. Elias settled onto a simple cot. Still dressed, rifle within reach. Guardian or captor neither, she realized. Just a man who understood what the mountain could do to the unprepared. "Elias." A grunt of acknowledgement. "What you said last night about women like me, soft women, what about it?" "You were wrong." Silence stretched. Then, just as she thought he wouldn't respond, "Maybe we'll see come spring." Clara smiled in the darkness. She'd prove him wrong. Prove them all wrong. James, his mother, everyone who'd tried to make her less than she was. She'd learn everything this taciturn mountain man could teach her. She'd survive winter. She'd become someone new. But first, she'd sleep. Because tomorrow, Elias Rourke would have more lessons, and she intended to master them all. The fire crackled low. Outside, snow began to fall again, but gentle this time. And in a shelter carved from stone, two damaged souls rested in comfortable silence, neither quite alone anymore. When Clara's breathing deepened into sleep, Elias allowed himself to study her in the firelight. City soft. Yes, but something else too, steel under that skin, like he'd told her, the kind that bends but doesn't break. He'd seen men crumble at less than what she'd already endured. Tomorrow he'd push harder, test that steel, not from cruelty, but necessity. The mountain didn't forgive weakness. But tonight, let her sleep. Let her think she'd found safety. Because safety was an illusion up here, and the sooner she learned that, the better chance she had of seeing spring. He pulled a worn book from under his cot, the only luxury he allowed himself. But instead of reading, he found himself watching the fire, listening to her breathe, wondering what kind of fool took in strays during the hardest winter in years. The kind of fool who'd been astray himself once, who knew what it meant to have nowhere left to go but up. He opened the book but didn't see the words. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Tonight, for the first time in longer than he cared to remember, his shelter felt less like a cave and more like something almost like home. Dangerous thinking, but then everything about Clara Malone felt dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with winter. Elias forced himself to read, to stop thinking about steel wrapped in silk, about eyes that met his without flinching, about what spring might bring besides snowmelt. Some lessons, he was beginning to suspect, might run both ways. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, the storm was outside where it belonged, and that was enough. It had to be. The days fell into rhythm like snow settling into drifts. Wake before dawn. Coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in. Work until muscles screamed. Learn until her head spun with new knowledge. Sleep like the dead, only to rise and begin again. Clara had never worked so hard in her life, also had never felt so purposeful. 2 weeks passed in this manner. She learned to wake at Elias's first movement, to have coffee ready when he returned from checking trap lines. They worked in comfortable silence, speaking only when necessary. Words were currency up here, spent sparingly. She grew stronger, her hands roughened, blistered, then calloused. The oversized boots no longer slipped on her feet. She'd learned to wrap them properly. Walk without wasting energy. When she split wood now, Elias just nodded instead of correcting her form. Small victories, mountain victories. On a morning when the sun finally showed itself, Elias announced they'd check the lower trap line together. "Think you're ready?" he asked, though it wasn't really a question. Clara strapped on the snowshoes he'd taught her to use, checked her pack with the supplies he'd drilled into her: matches in waterproof tin, dried meat, knife, rope, a whistle. Always assume you might not make it back before dark. Always prepare for the worst. They moved through the white world in single file, Elias breaking trail. Clara had learned to read his body language like scripture. When he paused, she paused. When he pointed, she looked. When he went still, she prepared for danger. The first trap was empty, tracks showing where a clever hare had stolen the bait without triggering the snare. Elias reset it without comment. The second held a marten, frozen stiff. He showed Clara how to remove it without damaging the pelt, how to reset with minimal disturbance. "Fur's good money in town," he explained. "One winter's trapping can keep a man fed through spring." "Is that what you do, trap for a living?" He glanced at her, that look that meant she'd asked something too close to personal. But he answered, "Trap, hunt, guide when I have to. Whatever keeps me up here." Away from people. Clara understood. Away from whatever had driven him to this isolation. She recognized the impulse. The third trap had been disturbed, torn apart with violence that made Clara step back. "What did that?" Elias knelt, studying the tracks. His face went carefully blank. "Cat. A mountain cat. Big one. Male. From the size." He stood, scanning the trees. "Been following us for the last mile." Clara's blood chilled. She'd seen nothing, heard nothing, but Elias had known. How many other dangers had he shielded her from without her realizing? "What do we do?" "Keep moving. Don't run. Don't show fear." He adjusted his rifle. "And don't separate." They continued down the line, but the easy rhythm was broken. Clara found herself starting at every sound, seeing threats in every shadow. When a branch cracked under snow weight, she nearly jumped out of her skin. "Easy," Elias murmured. "Fear's useful. Panic's not." At the fourth trap, he stopped so suddenly she almost ran into him. There in the snow, prints so fresh the edges hadn't yet softened. The cat had circled them, come close enough to study them, then melted back into the forest. "He's deciding," Elias said quietly, "whether we're worth the trouble. And if he decides we are—" Elias's hand settled on his rifle. "Then I decide different." They finished checking the line without incident, but Clara could feel the cat's presence like weight between her shoulder blades. Only when they climbed back above the tree line did Elias relax his vigilance. "You did good," he said as they neared the shelter. "Didn't panic. Kept your head." The praise warmed her more than it should have. "I was terrified." "But you didn't show it. That's what matters." That evening, as Clara prepared their simple meal, she'd taken over cooking without discussion, she found herself humming. Stopped when she realized Elias was watching her. "What?" "Nothing." He went back to oiling his rifle. "Just been a while since I heard music up here." "I could stop." Didn't say that. So she continued, an old hymn her mother had loved. The melody filled the small space, pushed back the darkness pressing against the windows. When she glanced at Elias again, his eyes were closed, face softer than she'd ever seen it. After dinner, instead of cards, he pulled out a leather-wrapped bundle. Inside was a harmonica, tarnished but clean. "You play—" He answered by lifting it to his lips. The notes that emerged were pure and mournful, a song that spoke of loss and longing and vast empty spaces. Clara sat transfixed. This taciturn man who measured words like gold could make metal and breath sing with eloquence he'd never put to voice. When he finished, the silence felt sacred. "That was beautiful," He tucked the harmonica away, embarrassed. Ben used to say I played like a dying moose. Ben... The name had slipped out. Elias's face closed immediately, but Clara waited. She'd learned patience from him, learned when to push and when to let silence do the work. My brother, he said finally, younger, used to trap these mountains together. Used to, past tense. Clara didn't ask what happened, but later, when Elias pulled out the worn book he read each night, he said without looking up. Avalanche. 3 winters back. Spring melt made the snow unstable. I told him to wait, but Ben never could sit still when the weather turned warm. He turned a page he hadn't read. Found him when the snow melted. Buried him up near Owl's Peak, where he liked to watch sunrise. I'm sorry. Wasn't your fault. No, but I'm still sorry. He looked at her then. Really looked. Something passed between them in the firelight, recognition of shared loss, shared guilt, the weight of surviving when others didn't. Is that why you stay? Clara asked softly. To be close to him. Maybe. Or maybe I stay because down there doesn't make sense anymore. He closed the book. Mountains are honest. They'll kill you clean if you're careless. But they don't pretend to be something they're not. People, he shrugged. Clara understood. People promised employment, then disappeared. People vowed to love, then cast you out for speaking truth. People smiled while sharpening knives for your back. I had a husband, she heard herself say. James, a banker in Chicago. Married him young, thought I was lucky, handsome, established. Chose me when he could have had anyone. Elias said nothing, but his stillness invited continuation. He wanted an ornament, something pretty to display at dinners, silent and smiling. I tried. God, how I tried. But I've never been good at keeping thoughts inside when I see something wrong. And James, he made many things wrong. Bad investments, worse friends, debts he hid until they came calling. She stared into the fire, remembering the day I finally spoke up. Told his mother what her precious son had done to our finances. He said I was too much, too loud, too opinionated, too everything. Sent me away with Coach Fair and told me a real woman would have suffered in silence. He was wrong. The simple certainty in Elias's voice made her throat tight. Was he? I'm here. Aren't I alone in the mountains? No home, no people. You're surviving, learning, getting stronger every day. His dark eyes held hers steady. That's not too much. That's not enough credit to yourself. Clara blinked against sudden moisture. When had anyone last defended her to herself? We're a pair, aren't we? She managed. Hidden away from the world, licking our wounds. Nothing wrong with wolves that walk alone. Sometimes the pack's the problem, not the wolf. They sat in companionable silence, fire crackling between them. Outside, wind sang through the peaks, but inside was warm and safe, almost like home, if home could be built from stone and silence and careful kindness. When Clara finally rose to prepare for sleep, Elias spoke again. That song you were humming, what was it? Shall we gather at the river? My mother's favorite. Would you... That is... He cleared his throat. Might be nice to hear it proper, if you don't mind. Clara smiled. I don't mind. She sang softly, voice rusty from disuse but true. The old hymn filled the shelter, speaking of rivers and meetings and eternal shore. When she glanced at Elias, his eyes were closed again. Face peaceful. Maybe they were hiding from the world. Maybe they were broken things seeking shelter. But broken things could still make music, could still find warmth, could still recognize grace in unexpected places. When Clara finished singing, Elias murmured words almost too quiet to catch. Ben would have liked you. Too much spirit for your own good. He'd say, just his type. It was the closest to a compliment she'd gotten from him. Clara carried it to sleep like a warming stone, holding it against the cold places that hadn't thawed yet. Tomorrow would bring more work, more lessons. The cat might return. The weather might turn. 1,000 dangers waited beyond their small circle of light. But tonight, 2 souls had shared songs and sorrows, and the wilderness felt less wild for it. Tonight, that was enough. The storm came without warning on a night when the stars had promised clear skies. Clara woke to the shelter shaking, wind screaming through the mountains like a living thing bent on destruction. The fire had burned low, casting everything in hellish red shadows. "Bad one," Elias said, already up and securing loose items. "Could last days." They worked together without need for words, patterns established over weeks of shared survival. Clara fed the fire while Elias checked the door, the window, every place where wind might find weakness. The storm tested every seal, howling its fury at being kept out. By morning, if it was morning, impossible to tell through the white wall outside the window, they'd settled into siege mentality. Elias taught Clara to ration in her mind, to always assume a storm would last longer than expected. 3 days of firewood inside, he said, gesturing to their supply. Food for a week if we're careful. Water's no problem, enough snow to melt. We wait. But waiting with Elias was different than waiting alone would have been. He showed her how to mend gear, hands patient as he guided her through saddle-stitching leather. She read to him from his single book, Plutarch's Lives, pages worn soft as cloth. On the second night, with the storm showing no sign of breaking, Clara asked, "How long have you had this book?" "Ben gave it to me. Christmas, 6 years back. Said I needed to learn about people who were deader than my conversation skills." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Read it so many times I could recite passages, but I like hearing it in a different voice." So she read about Caesar and Brutus, about honor and betrayal, while the mountain tried to tear itself apart outside. When her throat grew dry, Elias made pine needle tea, the ritual of it soothing as the warmth. "You never ask why I don't have more books," he observed. "Figured if you wanted more, you'd have them. Town has a lending library. Mrs. Henderson brings books up sometimes, when weather permits, but—" He struggled for words. "One book you can know complete, learn its corners and shadows, like a friend. Too many books. You're just visiting with strangers." Clara understood. In Chicago, she'd had rooms full of books, each read once and shelved. Here, with just one, she was discovering depth she'd have missed in abundance. The third night, the storm reached crescendo. Something crashed outside, a tree giving up its fight. The walls creaked. Clara found herself unconsciously moving closer to Elias's solid presence. "Built this place to last," he said, reading her fear. "Dug into the mountain itself. Storm can't take what the mountain holds." "Were you afraid when you first came up here?" "Every day. Fear's just another tool if you use it right. Keeps you sharp, careful." He fed another log to the fire. "What scares you besides storms?" Clara considered. So many fears she'd carried. Of poverty, of being alone, of being too much, of not being enough. But in the flickering light, with death howling outside, only one seemed worth voicing. Becoming small again, going back to who I was, smiling when I want to scream, nodding when I want to fight, making myself nothing to keep peace. She pulled the blanket tighter. "I think I'd rather freeze up here than thaw into that woman again." Elias was quiet long enough she wondered if she'd said too much. Then, "First time I saw you, standing in that lodge with a poker raised, ready to fight," thought to myself. "There's someone who's done being small, just doesn't know it yet." "I was terrified." "But you didn't run, didn't beg, stood your ground." He met her eyes across the fire. "That's not small. That's steel." The word again, steel, from him. It felt like baptism. "I don't feel like steel. I feel like glass, like I might shatter if I stop moving." Glass can take heat that would melt steel. Just has to be tempered right. He gestured around the shelter. "What do you think this winter's doing? You're not shattering. You're getting stronger. Clara wanted to argue, to list her failures and fears, but something in his certainty stopped her. When had anyone ever seen strength in her instead of flaws to correct? "Tell me about before," she said instead. "Before here, before Ben. Were you always alone?" His face went through several expressions before settling on resignation. "No. Had a wife once. Married young. Thought we'd build something lasting. Margaret, pretty as morning, sweet as honey. Everyone said I was lucky." The parallels to her own story made Clara's chest tight. She wanted town life, parties, socials, church committees. "I tried. Worked in her father's store. Wore starched collars. Made conversation about nothing." He stared into the fire. "But mountains kept calling. I'd sneak off. Hunt weekends. Come back wild-eyed and restless. She'd cry. Say I loved mountains more than her." "Did you?" "Loved different things. She wanted me to be someone else. I wanted her to love who I was. Both waiting for change that wouldn't come." He shifted, uncomfortable with revelation. Day she left, took the eastbound stage with a drummer who promised her San Francisco society. Left a note saying I was already married to the wilderness. "Were you angry?" "Relieved." The admission came hard. "That make me terrible." "No, makes you honest." They sat with shared understanding. Two people who'd tried to fit shapes others carved for them. Finally free, but scarred from the attempt. Ben came up after that. Elias continued, said if I was going to live like a hermit, at least I could have company. We trapped together 3 years. Good years. Laughed more than I had since childhood. Then the mountain took him. "Mountain didn't take anything. I did. Saw the conditions. Knew the danger. Should have tied him to a tree if I had to, but I let him go because I was tired of arguing, tired of being the cautious one." His hands clenched. "My job was keeping him safe. I failed." Clara moved without thinking, crossing the small space to sit beside him. Not touching, just close enough to share warmth. "You weren't his keeper. He made a choice." "Wrong choice." "His choice still—" Elias turned to look at her, faces close in the dim light. "You always so free with absolution." "Only for people carrying guilt that isn't theirs. I've got enough of my own to recognize the difference." Something shifted in his expression. For a moment, the careful distance he maintained cracked, showing glimpses of the man beneath, lonely, grieving, but not broken, not quite. "Clara." The wind chose that moment to redouble its assault, sending something heavy against the door. They both startled. Moment broken. Elias rose to check the barrier. All business again. But when he returned to his seat, he chose the spot beside her instead of across the fire. They sat shoulder to shoulder, not quite touching, while the storm raged its fury. "You asked what scares me," Elias said eventually. "Losing someone else to this mountain. Why I nearly left you in that lodge. Easier to be alone than responsible for another life." "But you didn't leave me." "No." The word carried weight. "Couldn't. Saw you ready to fight the world with a poker and bad boots. Thought, maybe this one's different. Maybe this one won't need saving." "I needed saving that night. From cold, maybe, not from yourself." He glanced at her. "That's the difference." Clara felt warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. "So you're not my keeper either." "No, just teaching you to keep yourself. And when I've learned everything you can teach." The question hung between them, heavy as the storm. When spring came, when she could survive alone, what then? Back to town, back to the empty lodge, or— "Then you choose." Elias said simply, "Stay. Go. Whatever feels right, choice is yours." But the way he said it, carefully neutral, told her his preference, and the way her heart lifted at the possibility told her hers. "Right now, I choose to survive this storm," she said, dodging the larger question. "Then we'll see what tomorrow brings." "Fair enough." They sat through the night, sometimes talking, sometimes silent, always aware of each other's presence. When Clara finally dozed against his shoulder, Elias didn't move. When he pulled a blanket over her without waking her, she nestled closer. The storm broke near dawn, wind dying to whispers, then silence. Weak sunlight painted the window gold. The world outside would be transformed, sculpted into new shapes by wind and snow. Inside, something had shifted too. Not love, too soon, too simple a word for what grew between them, but recognition, trust, the bone-deep understanding that comes from sharing darkness and finding light together. When Clara woke, still tucked against Elias's warmth, she didn't pull away. When he said, "Storm's past, work to do," his voice held gentleness that hadn't been there before. They'd weathered more than wind and snow. They'd weathered the careful walls between them, found spaces where broken edges might fit together. Not healing, not yet, but maybe the promise of it, distant as spring but just as certain. "Elias." Thank you for the shelter, for everything. Too much to say." "You don't run from pain," he said, echoing his words from weeks ago. "You sit with it, and it learns to fear you." Clara smiled. "Maybe pain's not what I'm sitting with anymore." He looked at her, understanding perfect between them. "Maybe not," he agreed. Then they rose, faced the day, and began the work of digging out, together. The morning dawned clear and brittle, the kind of cold that made the world seem carved from crystal. Clara woke before Elias for once, moving quietly to start coffee without disturbing his rare sleep. She'd learned his rhythms, how he jerked awake at unfamiliar sounds but slept through familiar ones. Her movements had become familiar. Standing at the small window, watching sunrise paint the peaks rose and gold. She tried to remember the last time she'd made breakfast for James. Always servants for that. Of course, a proper banker's wife didn't cook, didn't split wood or haul water or skin rabbits either. That woman seemed like a stranger now, someone who wore different skin. "You're up early." Elias's voice rough with sleep. "Wanted to see sunrise. It's been so long since the sky was clear." He joined her at the window, shoulder brushing hers. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the world wake. Below, fresh snow had erased all traces of their passage, made everything new. "Spring melt starts soon," he said eventually. "Another month, maybe 6 weeks." Clara's stomach tightened. Spring meant choices, meant the world below becoming accessible again, meant deciding who she wanted to be when the snow no longer locked her in place. "I was thinking," she said carefully, "about the lodge, all that space going to waste." "What about it?" "Could be useful, fixed up proper, maybe as a way station for trappers, or—" She hesitated, then pushed forward. "Or a place to dry pelts, process furs before taking them to market. Would save trips to town." Elias turned to study her. "That's thinking ahead more than a month." "Is it wrong to plan?" "No, just—" He seemed to wrestle with words. "Didn't figure you for staying. Most don't. Mountains hard living, even in summer." "I'm not most people." "No," he agreed quietly. "You're not." Clara turned from the window, bustling herself with breakfast preparation to hide the heat in her cheeks. But she could feel his gaze following her movements, thoughtful and measuring. They ate in their usual quiet, but the silence felt different, charged with possibility. When Clara reached for his empty plate, their fingers brushed. Neither pulled away immediately. "I'll teach you something new today," Elias said abruptly. "Baking. Proper bread. Not just pan biscuits." "You know how to bake bread." "Ben taught me. Said man couldn't live on meat and biscuits alone." A small smile touched his lips. "Takes patience. Time. Can't rush it." "Like other things," Clara thought but didn't say. He showed her how to proof yeast in warm water sweetened with precious sugar. how to feel when dough had been kneaded enough, how to judge temperature without a thermometer. His hands covered hers on the dough, guiding pressure and rhythm. "Like this," he murmured. "Firm, but not harsh. Let it know who's in charge without breaking it." Clara was acutely aware of his presence behind her, the warmth of him, the careful way he kept just enough distance to be proper while still teaching. When had she last been touched with such consideration James had either grabbed or ignored? Nothing between. "You're tensing up," Elias observed. "Bread feels what you feel. Comes out tough if you're fighting it." She forced herself to relax, to find the rhythm. Push, fold, turn, push, fold, turn. Meditative, almost peaceful. "Better," he approved, stepping back. "Now it rises, twice. Can't skip steps, can't hurry. Good things take the time they take." While the dough rose, they tended other chores, but Clara found herself checking it often, marveling at how flour and water and time could transform into something sustaining. Found herself stealing glances at Elias too, wondering at transformations less visible but no less real. When time came to shape the loaves, Elias taught her to be gentle. "Already did the hard work. Now you're just guiding it into form." The metaphor wasn't lost on either of them. As bread baked, filling the shelter with warmth and comfort, they sat by the fire. Elias was mending a trap, fingers sure on the metal. Clara was supposed to be patching a shirt, but found herself watching his hands instead. Scarred, capable hands that could set snares or bake bread with equal skill. That could be gentle despite their strength. "What are you thinking?" he asked without looking up. "About hands," she said honestly. "How they show who we are. Yours tell stories." He flexed them self-consciously. "Not pretty stories. True stories. That's worth more." He set aside the trap, really looked at her. "What do yours say?" Clara examined her own hands, still bearing faint marks from her city softness, but calloused now too. Small scars from learning, from trying, from refusing to give up. "They say I'm changing, becoming something new. Or something that was always there, just covered up." The bread smell grew stronger, filling every corner. Home smell, Clara thought. When had this cave become home? "I want to ask you something," she said, "but I need honest answer, not kind ones." His expression grew wary. "All right. Could I really make it up here, not just survive winter with help, but live, build something, alone if I had to?" Elias considered carefully, and she loved him. No, appreciated him for not answering quickly. Month ago, I'd have said no. Week ago, maybe. He met her eyes steadily. Today you've got the skills, got the will. Question is whether you've got the heart for it, this kind of alone. It changes you, not always for the better. "Were you better before?" "I was different, trying to be what others expected. Up here, I just am." He paused. "But there's a cost. Days you don't hear another voice. Nights so quiet your thoughts get too loud. Start talking to yourself just for the sound. That's what broke Margaret. Partly the silence." "I don't mind silence. Not anymore." Clara chose her words carefully. "And I wouldn't be alone, would I?" The question hung between them like morning mist, delicate and vital. Elias's hands stilled on his work. "No," he said finally, voice low. "You wouldn't be alone." Before Clara could respond, he rose abruptly. Bread should be done. He was right. The loaves emerged golden and perfect, crackling as they cooled. They ate it warm with the last of their butter, and it tasted like possibility, like future, like home. As afternoon wore on, they moved in new awareness of each other. When Clara passed behind his chair, her hand brushed his shoulder. When Elias helped her with heavy water buckets, his touch lingered. Small things. Careful things, testing warmth like winter animals emerging into spring. After dinner, instead of separate activities, Elias brought out his harmonica. "Play something," Clara requested, "something happy this time." He obliged with a lively tune that had her tapping her feet. When he finished, she applauded, and he actually smiled, a real smile that changed his whole face. "Dance with me," she said impulsively. "Don't dance." "Neither do I, not anymore." She stood, held out her hand. "But I want to try." He looked at her extended hand like it might bite. Then, slowly, set aside the harmonica and stood. Neither knew proper steps. Didn't matter. They moved together in the small space, careful and awkward, while he hummed the melody he'd just played, Clara's hand in his other hand light on her waist. Appropriate distance between them, but warm with promise. "I'm probably doing this wrong," she murmured. "No wrong way if it feels right." They swayed more than danced, finding rhythm that belonged to them alone. When the hummed song ended, they didn't separate immediately. Stood there, holding position, holding breath, holding the moment like spun glass. "Clara." "I know," she said quickly. "Too fast, too much, I know." "That's not what I was going to say." She looked up at him, finding his dark eyes soft in the firelight. "Was going to say you make me remember why I liked dancing. Before, when things were lighter." Her throat tightened. "You make me remember I'm allowed to want things, to choose things, to be more than what others decided I should be." His hand on her waist tightened fractionally. Then, with careful deliberation, he leaned down and pressed his lips to her forehead. Not a kiss of passion, but of promise, of recognition. When he pulled back, Clara saw her own wonder reflected in his eyes. "Spring's coming," he said quietly. "Things will change. But this—" He gestured between them, at the invisible threads drawing them together. "This doesn't have to, unless you want it to." "I don't want it to." "Then it won't." Simple as that, complex as that. They separated, returned to their evening routines, but everything felt different, charged with potential, with permission to become whatever they might become together. That night, as Clara settled into her furs, she called softly, "Elias." "Thank you for the bread lesson." She heard his quiet, huffed laugh. "Just bread, Clara." But they both knew it was more. It was patience and time and transformation. It was hands teaching hands, careful touches, space to rise into new shapes. It was the first admission that winter might end, but what grew between them didn't have to. Outside, wind sang through the peaks. Inside, two people lay in separate beds, thinking of shared dances, of foreheads kissed, of bread rising patient and sure, of spring coming like promise, bringing choice and change and chance. Tomorrow would bring its own lessons, its own careful steps toward whatever they were becoming. But tonight, Clara fell asleep smiling, flour still under her nails, the ghost of Elias's touch warm on her skin, and hope rising in her chest like dough given time and warmth and care to become what it was meant to be. Tonight, she wasn't running from anything. She was moving towards something, someone, and that made all the difference. The men arrived on a morning when ice crystals hung in the air like suspended diamonds. Clara heard them before she saw them, rough voices carrying across the snow, laughter that had an edge to it. She was outside checking the water barrel when they emerged from the tree line, 5 of them, loaded with mining gear. "Well, well," the one in front called out. "What have we here?" Clara straightened, hand moving instinctively to the knife at her belt. Elias had insisted she always carry it. The men spread out, semicircle forming, and she recognized the look in their eyes. Had seen it in Chicago drawing rooms, just dressed in finer clothes. "This is private property," she said, voice steady despite her racing heart. "That's so." The leader, beard streaked with tobacco stains, grinned. "Funny thing, we heard old Ashford's place was empty. Figured we'd set up operations here." Spring thaw's coming. Good time to start working the streams. You heard wrong. The property's occupied. By you, another man laughed. Little lady playing house all alone up here. I'm not. Clara. Elias's voice came quiet, but carrying. He stood in the shelter doorway, rifle casual in his hands. These gentlemen lost. The atmosphere changed instantly. The men's casual arrogance shifted to wariness. Everyone in these mountains knew Elias Rourke, at least by reputation. The man who'd chosen solitude over society, who could track a ghost through a blizzard, who'd buried his brother and never came down from the mountain after... Rourke, the leader said, false friendliness coding his words. Didn't know you'd moved operations down here. Thought you kept to the high country. I go where I'm needed. And you're needed here. The man's eyes slid between Elias and Clara, drawing conclusions. Playing house yourself now. The lady told you this property's occupied. Nothing more to discuss. Now hold on. One of the other miners, younger, bolder, stepped forward. Way we see it, this is Ashford land. Ashford's gone. That makes it open for claiming. You see wrong. Maybe we should ask the lady what she thinks, Tobacco Beard suggested. Eyes never leaving Clara. Bet she's got opinions. What's a proper woman doing up here anyway, lest she ain't so proper? Oh. Clara felt Elias go still, the kind of stillness that preceded avalanches. But before he could move, she stepped forward. I'll tell you what I think, she said, voice clear. I think you're trespassing. I think you're the kind of men who see a woman alone and think that makes her weak. I think you should leave before you learn different. Tobacco Beard laughed. Listen to her. Got some spirit? I like that. Makes it more fun when they... The rifle shot split the morning air. The water barrel beside Tobacco Beard exploded, showering him with ice. The other men reached for weapons, then froze as Elias worked the rifle's lever, the sound sharp as breaking bones. Next one doesn't miss, he said conversationally. Lady asked you to leave. I'm not asking. You can't shoot all of us. Rourke. Don't need to. Just need to shoot you. Elias's smile was winter cold. Others will run. Men like you always do when the lead starts flying. Question is, you want to die for an empty claim and pride? The standoff stretched taut. Clara could see Tobacco Beard calculating odds, weighing pride against survival. Finally, he spat into the snow. This ain't over. Law's on our side. Abandoned property. Take it to the judge come spring. Elias suggested. See how far you get. Until then, move on. The men gathered their dignity and gear, grumbling threats, but they left, vanishing back into the trees. Only when they were gone did Clara realize she was shaking. They'll be back, she said. Maybe, probably. Elias lowered the rifle. Men like that, they test boundaries, push to see what gives. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. He turned to her, and she saw controlled fury in his eyes. You don't know men like that. What they do when they think no one's watching. What they'd have done. He cut himself off, jaw tight. I know exactly what men like that do, Clara said quietly. Just usually in parlors instead of mountains. Different clothes, same intentions. Elias studied her, understanding dawning. Your husband, he ever... Not him, his friends, business associates. She wrapped her arms around herself. James thought it was harmless. Said I was too sensitive, reading too much into friendly attention. But I knew. Women always know. Clara, her name came out rough. If anyone ever... No one ever got the chance. I learned to avoid being alone with them. Learned to make myself invisible at parties. Silent at dinners. She met his eyes. One more reason I couldn't stay small anymore. Without thought, Elias reached out, hand gentle on her cheek. You were never small, just surrounded by small men who needed you to shrink so they could feel big. She leaned into his touch, finding comfort there. They'll come back, with more men, or with papers, or with— Let them come. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. This is your home now. Our home. I'll bleed before I let them take it. I don't want you bleeding for me. Not for you. With you. He dropped his hand, stepped back. There's a difference. That evening, they prepared. Elias showed Clara how to load and fire his spare rifle, how to brace for the kick, how to breathe through the shot. Her first attempts went wide, but she improved quickly. That same determined focus she brought to everything. You're not teaching me this for hunting, she observed. No, hope you never need it for the other thing, but hoping's not preparing. They moved supplies from the shelter to the lodge, making it more defensible. Set up sight lines, discussed fallback positions. Part of Clara felt she should be frightened. Instead, she felt fierce. This place, this life she was building, no one would take it from her. Not again. As they worked, Elias told her about claim law, about the papers Ashford should have filed, about possession being 9/10. Come spring, we'll go to town, file proper papers, make it legal. Until then, we hold ground. He paused in stacking wood. Unless you're planning to do this alone. No. The word came quick. No, I don't want— if you're willing. Clara. He faced her fully. I'm not good with words. Ben always said I'd rather chew rocks than speak feelings. But this— He gestured between them, at the space that had grown warm with possibility. This is real. More real than anything I've felt since— for a long time. For me, too. Then we face what comes together. The men, the papers, the talk that'll follow. His expression grew grim. Because there'll be talk. Mountain Man and the runaway wife. They'll make it ugly. Let them talk. I've been gossiped about before. Clara lifted her chin. Besides, I'd rather be notorious with you than respectable alone. Something shifted in Elias's face. Wonder, maybe, at finding someone who matched his mountain stubbornness. You sure this life? This life is the first one I've chosen. Every other was chosen for me. She stepped closer. I choose the cold mornings and hard work. I choose the silence and storms. I choose. She took a breath. I choose you, if you'll have me. Have you? His voice went rough. Clara, I'd carve your name in every tree from here to Canada if I thought it would keep you. I don't need grand gestures. I need— She tried to find words. I need someone who sees me whole. Not the parts that are convenient or comfortable, but all of it, the sharp edges and difficult pieces. I see you. He reached up, traced her jaw with one finger. See the steel and fire. See the way you face down 5 armed men without flinching. See how you sing when you think I'm not listening. See how you're building yourself new from snow and stone and sheer will. What do you see when you look in the mirror? His hand dropped. Man who failed his brother, who couldn't make a marriage work, who runs to mountains because people are too hard. I see different. Clara caught his hand, held it between both of hers. I see a man who loved his brother enough to grieve properly, who was honest enough to let a bad marriage end instead of pretending, who chose solitude over false company. That's not weakness. That's strength most lack. They stood there in the lodge that would become theirs, hands clasped, foreheads nearly touching. Outside, wind picked up, bringing the smell of snow, but inside was warm with more than fire. When they come back, Elias began. We'll be ready. Together. Together. He sealed it with a kiss, different from the careful forehead touch of nights ago. This was claiming and promise and partnership. When they broke apart, Clara saw her own fierce joy reflected in his eyes. Spring's coming, she said, changes and challenges and those men with their greed. Let it come. Elias pulled her closer. We've survived worse. You survived leaving everything behind. I survived losing everything I thought mattered. What's a few minors compared to that? Clara smiled, feeling wild and free and utterly herself. What indeed? That night, they made plans, legal strategies and defensive positions, how to file claims, how to establish residence, how to build something lasting from this winter refuge. They talked until the fire burned low, voices weaving together like smoke. And when Clara finally slept, it was with Elias's promise echoing in her mind. You don't belong to me, but I'd bleed before I let them touch you. Not ownership, partnership, not protection, solidarity. She'd found more than shelter in these mountains. She'd found someone who saw her strength and stood beside it rather than trying to diminish it. Found a life worth defending and someone worth defending it with. The miners would come back. The town would talk. Spring would bring its tests. But tonight, Clara Malone slept fearless, knowing that whatever came, she wouldn't face it alone, wouldn't face it small, would face it as herself, whole and fierce and finally, fully, free. The town of Bearclaw Ridge looked smaller than Clara remembered, huddled against the base of the mountain like a child against its mother's skirts. Spring had finally broken winter's grip, turning trails to mud and hopes to plans. She walked beside Elias, wearing the divided skirt she'd fashioned from old canvas, practical for mountain life, scandalous for town sensibilities. Remember, Elias murmured as they approached the main street. We stick to facts. File the papers. Get supplies. Don't give them more ammunition than necessary. Clara nodded, though her spine straightened with each step. She'd learned to face down blizzards and loneliness. Town gossip should be nothing. Shouldn't be. But the first women they passed stopped mid-conversation to stare. Clara heard the whispers start before they were 10 feet past. That's her, the Chicago woman who, living up there all winter with no shame at all, walking bold as brass. Elias's hand brushed hers. Brief comfort. Eyes forward. They don't matter. The land office occupied a narrow building between the general store and the saloon. Inside, a thin man with pomaded hair looked up from his ledger, eyes widening as he recognized them. Mr. Rourke, and his gaze traveled over Clara, taking in her mountain-rough appearance, the knife at her belt, the way she stood like she belonged. Ma'am, we need to file papers, Elias said without preamble. The Ashford Hunting Lodge and surrounding claims, establishing residence and intent to improve. I see. The clerk, his nameplate read, Mr. Josiah Pritchard, pulled out forms with obvious reluctance. And who would be filing this claim? Both of us, Clara said, stepping forward. Joint ownership. Pritchard's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. Joint ownership requires, that is, the law recognizes such arrangements between married couples or business partners with proper documentation. Then we file as business partners, Clara said firmly. The Bearclaw Ridge Hunting and Fur Company. Elias shot her a look. They hadn't discussed this, but backed her play. Draw up the papers. That is... Pritchard dabbed at his forehead with a handkerchief. There are those who've expressed interest in that property. The Buckley Mining Consortium. Has no claim. Elias interrupted. We've held the property all winter. Made improvements. That establishes possession. Yes, but a woman, that is Mrs. Malone, Clara supplied. And yes, a woman can file claims in Wyoming territory. The law is quite clear. She'd spent weeks studying the legal texts Elias had procured, learning her rights. Wyoming had granted women unprecedented legal standing, property rights, voting rights, business rights. One of the few places in the country where she could stand as equal partner rather than subordinate. Pritchard processed their paperwork with clear displeasure, muttering about proper procedures and necessary witnesses. But the law was the law, and eventually he stamped their documents with bad grace. The filing fee, he said, naming a sum that would have cleaned out Clara's funds 2 months ago. Elias paid without comment, though Clara saw his jaw tighten. Their winter furs would bring good money, but until they sold them... Outside, Clara breathed easier. The Bear Claw Ridge Hunting and Fur Company. Quick thinking. Elias steered her away from a cluster of staring townswomen. Though now we need to make it real. Business license, bank account. Partnership agreement, Clara added. Equal partners, equal say. He stopped walking, turned to face her there on the muddy main street. Is that what you want, equal partnership? In business and everything else. Even if the town talks worse, even if they make assumptions about why you're with me. Clara thought of the winter nights, the careful distance they'd maintained despite growing closeness. How he'd never pressed, never assumed, never took liberties despite their isolation. A gentleman in fur and flannel, more honorable than any Chicago society man. Let them assume. We know the truth. And what is the truth? His dark eyes searched hers. That we're building something real, something chosen. She touched his hand briefly. The rest will come when it comes. They moved on to the general store, where the keeper who'd sold Clara her boots greeted them with curiosity poorly masked as courtesy. Heard you made it through winter after all. He said to Clara, most of us figured I'd fail. Clara kept her voice pleasant as she handed over their supply list. Sorry to disappoint. No disappointment, ma'am. Just surprise. That lodge ain't easy living. Neither is Chicago when you're unwelcome. She met his eyes steadily. I prefer honest cold to false warmth. As the storekeeper filled their order, townspeople found reasons to drift in. Soon the store was fuller than commerce required. Everyone stealing glances at the mountain man and his mysterious companion. Finally, Mrs. Abigail Henderson, the town's self-appointed moral guardian, approached. Clara had been expecting this. My dear, Mrs. Henderson began, voice dripping concern. We've been so worried about you, all alone up there, no proper chaperone, exposed to such rough elements. I wasn't alone, Clara said calmly. Mr. Rourke provided shelter and education in mountain survival. I'm grateful for his kindness. Kindness. Mrs. Henderson's mouth pursed. Is that what we're calling it? What would you call saving someone from freezing, teaching them to survive, treating them with respect despite their circumstances? I'd call it improper. A unmarried woman, a unmarried man, all winter. She let the implications hang. You're right, Clara said, and saw surprise flicker across several faces. It was improper. So was my husband casting me out with nothing. So was arriving here to find my promised employment vanished. Sometimes propriety is a luxury we can't afford. But surely, now that spring is here, you'll return to civilization, find appropriate lodging. I've found my home, Clara said simply, and my partner in business. We've filed proper papers, established a legitimate company. Everything quite legal and above board. Legal, perhaps, but decent women don't... Decent women don't what? Clara's voice stayed level, but steel showed through. Don't survive, don't work, don't choose their own path. I've been the kind of decent, you mean, silent, submissive, shrinking myself to fit others' comfort. It nearly killed me. I prefer this indecency. Elias moved closer, not touching but present, supporting without overwhelming. The gesture wasn't lost on the watching crowd. You'll find no welcome here, Mrs. Henderson warned. No social calls, no church fellowship, no... I found no welcome when I was properly married either. Clara interrupted. At least here, the rejection is honest. I know where I stand. A younger woman near the back. Clara remembered her from that first day, working at the boarding house, spoke up unexpectedly. Takes courage, what you did, surviving winter up there, building something new. Mrs. Henderson turned on her. Martha Henley, you can't be condoning... I'm condoning survival, Martha said firmly. Condoning women making choices, Lord knows we get few enough of them. The battle lines drew themselves across the store. Some women nodded agreement with Martha. Others clustered around Mrs. Henderson's disapproval. The men watched with expressions ranging from amusement to discomfort. "We should go," Elias said quietly. "Got what we came for." But as they gathered their supplies, the store door banged open. Tobacco Beard from the mountains stood there with two companions, including the younger miner who'd challenged them before. Well, come to town to make it official. Have you—" He spat tobacco juice near Clara's boots. "Heard you filed papers." "We did," Elias confirmed, hand drifting toward his rifle. "Also heard you're claiming partnership. Business partnership." The man's leer made the words ugly. "That what we're calling it these days?" "Call it what you like," Clara said. "The law recognizes it." "Maybe, but possession's 9/10, like Rourke here said, and we possess information might interest folks." He produced a paper from his coat. "Telegraph from Chicago. Seems a certain James Malone is looking for his runaway wife, offering a reward for information about her whereabouts." Clara's blood chilled, but she kept her face calm. "I'm no runaway. James sent me away. I have his letter saying so." "Do you now, because this telegraph tells different? Says you stole money, jewelry, says you're wanted for theft." "That's a lie." "Maybe, maybe not. But mud sticks, don't it? And a wanted woman can't hold property. Legal-like, can't file claims." His grin widened. "Unless she wants the law looking too close at her circumstances." Elias moved then, faster than thought. His hand closed on Tobacco Beard's throat, driving him back against the doorframe. "You threatening her?" "Just sharing information," the man wheezed. "Public service." "Here's some information," Elias said, voice low and dangerous. "That mountain you want, it's mine. Has been for 8 years. The lodge is hers by right of salvage and improvement. You can fight us on it. Bring your lawyers and lies. But you remember this. Mountains have accidents. Men fall, get lost, disappear in storms. You push this, and I promise you'll learn why I live alone up there." He released the man, who stumbled back, gasping. The younger miner reached for his gun, then thought better of it under Elias's flat stare. "This ain't over," Tobacco Beard managed. "Law's coming. Questions are coming. Your woman better have answers." They left, but their poison remained. Clara felt the crowd's eyes, saw calculation replacing curiosity. A fallen woman was one thing, a criminal another entirely. "We need to go," Elias said. They loaded their supplies in tense silence, but as they reached the edge of town, Martha Henley came running after them. "Wait," she pressed a packet into Clara's hands. "Letters from the boarding house. Sometimes women write to me, looking for work. Thought you might. That is, if you're really building a business." Clara opened the packet, found 3 letters from women seeking employment. Honest work. One pleaded. Away from troubles, wrote another. "Thank you," Clara said, understanding passing between them. Women who needed what she'd needed. A chance to start over. "Takes courage," Martha repeated. "Don't let them steal that from you." As they climbed back toward their mountain home, Clara clutched the letters. Behind them, the town buzzed with gossip and speculation. Ahead, their lodge waited, solid and real despite every challenge. "He's lying," Clara said, "about the theft. James would never admit I left with only what he gave me. His pride." "I know," Elias said simply. "Doesn't matter if it's true. Matters if they can use it against us." "So what do we do?" "We build our company, make it real, profitable, established. Harder to tear down something that's working." He glanced at the letters in her hands. "Maybe we hire help, witnesses to our legitimate business." "Women who need chances," Clara said softly. "Like I did." "Like we both did." They climbed higher, leaving the town's judgment behind. Clara looked back once, seeing Bear Claw Ridge spread below like scattered dice, so small from here, so petty in its prejudices. "No regrets?" Elias asked. "None." Clara faced forward, toward home. "Let them talk. Let them threaten. We know who we are. What we're building, that's more than most down there can say. The Chicago threat. We'll handle it, together." She shifted her pack, chin lifting. "I'm not running anymore. Not from James. Not from gossip. Not from narrow minds. This is my ground now. Our ground. And I'll defend it." Elias smiled then, fierce and proud. "That's my partner. Partner. Business and perhaps, someday, more. But for now, this was enough. This choice, this challenge, this chance to build something from nothing but determination and trust." The mountain rose before them, hard and honest as truth, their truth, written in survival and strength and the courage to stand against whatever came. Spring had arrived, and with it, battle lines were drawn. But Clara Malone, soon to be Clara Malone of the Bear Claw Ridge Hunting and Fur Company, was ready for war. She'd survived winter. She'd survived solitude. She'd survived finding herself. A few miners and gossips, they didn't stand a chance. The fever came on sudden as a spring storm. One moment Elias was checking trap lines. The next, he was stumbling, vision blurring, cold sweat despite the warming weather. He made it back to the lodge through sheer will, collapsing just inside the door. Clara found him there an hour later, burning with fever, mumbling words she couldn't catch. "No," she breathed, dropping to her knees beside him. "Not now, not like this." She'd learned to treat minor injuries over the winter cuts, sprains, the everyday damage of mountain life. But this fever, the way it consumed him, the wound on his shoulder she discovered when removing his shirt, infected, angry red, streaking poison toward his heart. The old Clara might have panicked, might have wrung her hands and wept. This Clara acted. She half dragged, half carried him to the bed. No mean feat given his size. Stripped him efficient as any nurse. Modesty be damned when life hung in balance. The wound was worse than she'd feared. What he'd dismissed as a minor scrape from a broken trap had festered, gone bad. "Should have told me," she muttered, heating water, gathering what medicines they had. Stubborn man, too proud to admit pain. Through the night she worked, drew on every scrap of knowledge, her mother's remedies, what Elias had taught her about mountain herbs, pure instinct, willow bark tea for fever, honey and whiskey to clean the wound, poultices of pine pitch to draw infection. He fought her in delirium, strong even burning with fever, called for Ben, apologies tumbling from cracked lips, called for her too, her name twisted with fear. "Don't go," he begged, unseeing eyes fixed on something beyond her. "Clara, don't let them take you. I'll fight them. I'm here," she soothed, cool cloth on burning skin. "I'm not going anywhere." The second night was worse. His breathing went shallow, rattling. The infection spread despite her efforts. Red lines crawling up his arm like accusation. Clara knew with cold certainty that he would die if something didn't change. She could go to town for the doctor. 4 hours down, 4 back if she ran, but leaving him alone that long, and the doctor might not come anyway, not for Elias Rourke who'd chosen mountains over men, not with her reputation what it was. "Please," she whispered, not sure who she addressed. The mountain, maybe the god she'd half forgotten. "Please, I've lost enough. Don't take him too." That's when she remembered the letters. One of the women seeking work had mentioned nursing experience, army hospitals during the war. If she could find her, convince her. But that meant leaving Elias, trusting he'd survive her absence. Clara made her choice at dawn, wrapped him warm, left water within reach though he was past drinking, pressed her lips to his burning forehead. "You hold on," she commanded. You hear me? Elias Rourke. You don't get to leave me, not after teaching me to survive. You hold on, and I'll bring help. She'd never run so fast in her life. Down the mountain, slipping in mud, branches tearing at her clothes, into town like a wild thing, past the stairs and whispers, straight to the boarding house. Martha, she gasped, bursting through the door. The woman who wrote about nursing, Sarah McKnight. Is she here? Martha took one look at her, wild-eyed, mud-splattered, desperate, and didn't waste time with questions. Room 3 just arrived yesterday. Clara took the stairs 2 at a time, pounded on the door until a woman answered. Mid-30s, plain-faced, steady eyes. Are you Sarah McKnight, the nurse? I am. I need you, now. Please, my partner is dying. Infection, fever. I've done what I can, but... Where? The mountain. 4 hours hard walking. I'll pay whatever. Get me there. Sarah was already reaching for her bag. Tell me symptoms on the way. They made the climb in 3 hours. Clara pushing harder than she'd thought possible. Sarah keeping pace without complaint. By the time they reached the lodge, Clara's legs shook with exhaustion, but she didn't slow. Elias lay still as death, barely breathing. Sarah went to work immediately, examining the wound with professional efficiency. Blood poisoning, she confirmed. Advanced. You've done well to keep him alive this long. She pulled supplies from her bag, real medicines. Sharp steel. Clean bandages. I'll need hot water, much as you can heat, and light, all the lamps. What followed was controlled battle. Sarah lanced the wound, drained infection, applied treatments Clara had never seen. Through it all, she maintained calm commentary. Learned this in the war. Boy soldiers dying of infected scratches while bullets missed them clean. Infection kills more than violence. She worked steady. Sure. Your man's strong. That's good. Gives us chance. We're not. Clara started to protest, then stopped. What were they? If not bound together, will he live? Maybe. Next few hours tell. Sarah glanced at her. You should rest. You're no good to him collapsed. But Clara couldn't leave his side, sat there holding his hand. When had she started doing that, willing her strength into him? Sarah worked around her, changing poultices, forcing medicine between slack lips. Near midnight, the fever broke. Elias's breathing deepened, steadied. The angry red lines began to fade. When his eyes opened, focused and aware, Clara nearly sobbed. Clara! His voice came hoarse, confused. What? Sarah? Sarah McKnight smiled. Hello, Elias. Been some years. You know each other. Clara looked between them. Patched him up once before, Sarah explained. After his brother died, found him half frozen, gone wild with grief. Brought him down, made sure he ate until the worst passed. Never thanked you proper, Elias managed. Thank your lady. She ran half the mountain to fetch me. Sarah began packing her supplies. Wound's clean now. Needs rest. Careful tending, but he'll mend. I'll stay tonight. Make sure, if that's acceptable. More than acceptable, Clara said fervently. Whatever you need, whatever it costs. We'll discuss that later. Sarah's eyes were kind. For now, let's get some food in both of you. And Elias, next time you scratch yourself on rusty metal, clean it proper. Pride makes poor medicine. Through the night, the women took turns watching. Clara dozed fitfully in a chair, jerking awake each time Elias stirred. Sarah tended him with quiet competence, changing bandages, monitoring fever. Dawn came gentle, painting the peaks rose and gold. Elias woke clear-eyed, saw Clara slumped in her chair, Sarah brewing coffee. She stayed, he said, wonder in his voice. Course she stayed, Sarah replied. Woman who'll run down a mountain for help doesn't abandon what she's fought for. When Clara woke, she found Elias watching her with expression she'd never seen before. Soft and fierce and full of something that made her heart race. "You saved me," he said simply. "Sarah saved you. You brought Sarah, risked leaving, risked them keeping you in town, keeping you from coming back." He reached out with his good hand, caught hers. Why? Clara thought of all the pretty words she could say, settled on truth. "Because I choose you. Every day. I choose you. Choose this life we're building. And I won't let fever or infection or any other damn thing take it away." His fingers tightened on hers. "Clara Malone, you're the strongest person I've ever known. I learned from the best." Sarah cleared her throat. "Not to interrupt, but we should discuss arrangements. Clara mentioned you're hiring, building a business." She looked around the lodge, seeing its potential. "I'm interested, if you'll have me." Clara and Elias exchanged glances, entire conversation in a look. "We'd be honored," Clara said. "Fair wages, room and board, share in the profits once we're established." "And patience?" Sarah asked. "Because if I know Elias Rourke, this won't be the last time someone needs patching." "Anyone who needs help," Elias confirmed. "We take care of our own up here." Sarah smiled. "Then you've got yourself a company nurse, and cook, and whatever else needs doing. Learned to make myself useful in the war. Haven't stopped since." As the morning progressed, Clara felt something settling into place. Not just relief at Elias's recovery, but recognition. This was how it started. Building something bigger than two people hiding from the world. Building community. Building home. "The others will come after this," Elias warned as Sarah stepped out to gather healing herbs. "The miners, the gossips. They'll see us growing stronger and push harder." "Let them come," Clara said, fierce as any mountain cat. "I've seen you at your weakest and refuse to let go. Think I'll flinch at their petty threats." "You can sleep when I'm done with you," Elias murmured, echo of that first night. "Remember." "I remember." She leaned close, pressed her forehead to his. "But I'm not done with you either. Not by half. So you rest, you heal, and you get strong, because we have a company to build, a life to defend, and I refuse to do it without you." "Yes, ma'am," he said, smile playing at his lips. "Though you seem to be doing fine leading while I'm laid up." "Partners," she corrected. "That's what we are. In everything." "In everything," he agreed, and sealed it with a kiss that tasted of fever break and promise and tomorrows worth fighting for. Outside, Sarah gathered herbs and hummed old war songs. Inside, two people who'd found each other in wilderness chose each other again in weakness and in strength. The infection had tried to take him, but Clara had fought back with medicine and will and love. Yes, love. No point denying it now. She'd won this battle. Would win the wars to come. Because Clara Malone, partner in the Bear Claw Ridge Hunting and Fur Company, nurse fetcher, mountain woman, didn't know how to quit, didn't know how to be small. And with Alice Rourke by her side, she'd never have to be again. Spring had fully claimed the mountain now, painting wildflowers across meadows that had been buried in snow. The Bear Claw Ridge Hunting and Fur Company was no longer just papers and promises. It was real, thriving, alive with possibility. Clara stood at the market stall they'd set up at the spring fair, selling the winter's furs and the leather goods she'd learned to craft. Her hands, once soft from city living, now showed the calluses of honest work. She wore divided skirts without apology, her hair braided practical, her bearing straight and proud. "Fine work," a woman commented, examining a pair of gloves. "Local made." "Every stitch," Clara confirmed. "We do custom orders too. Send word to the lodge if you need anything specific." The woman, a rancher's wife from the valley, nodded appreciation. "Heard about your company. taking on women who need work, teaching them trades. That's good business. It was more than business. 3 women had joined them now, besides Sarah, each fleeing something, seeking something, finding both shelter and purpose in the mountains. The lodge had grown, new rooms added, workshop space for leather and fur processing. What had been Elias's lonely refuge had become something else entirely. "Clara of the Mountain," a familiar voice sneered behind her. She turned to find James's mother standing there, dressed in traveling clothes that cost more than most families saw in a year. Mrs. Constance Malone, come all the way from Chicago to reclaim what she saw as hers. "Constance," Clara said calmly, "I heard you might visit." "Is that all you have to say after the shame you've brought the scandal?" The older woman's face pinched with distaste. "Running off like a common, taking up with some mountain savage. The talk in Chicago has been unbearable." "Then perhaps you should have stayed in Chicago. I've come to bring you back. James has reconsidered. He's willing to forgive your outburst, your flight. You can return to your proper place." Clara actually laughed. "My proper place, silent in his parlor, ignored at his table, watching him gamble away money we don't have while I smile and nod. You're his wife." He sent me away. Remember, with coach fare and a letter saying I was too much trouble." Clara's voice stayed level, though fire burned beneath. "I have that letter still, the one releasing me from all obligations. Would you like to see it?" Constance flushed. "That was a misunderstanding. Heat of the moment. James wants you back. James wants his pride back, wants to stop the gossip, wants a wife to display again since the banker's daughter he was courting heard about his debts." Clara had her own sources, letters from friends who actually cared. "But what James wants stopped mattering the day he threw me out. You're living in sin with that hermit. The whole town talks of it. We're business partners, legal and proper. If minds want to make more of it, that's their failing, not ours." As if summoned by the conflict, Elias appeared. He moved carefully still. The infection had taken weeks to fully clear, but he stood solid and sure. His presence changed the very air, made Constance step back. "Mrs. Malone," he said with courtesy that somehow sounded like warning. "Come to see the sights." "I've come to retrieve my son's wife." "Your son has no wife here, only a woman he discarded who made something better from the breaking." Elias moved to stand beside Clara, not touching but undeniably together. "You should go back to Chicago, ma'am. Tell your son his former wife is well, happy, no longer his concern. She's still married in the eyes of God." "Then God watched your son cast her out penniless in winter," Sarah said, approaching with steel in her voice. "Watched her nearly freeze finding shelter. Watched her work until her hands bled to earn her place. Where was his concern then?" More of their company women gathered, drawn by raised voices, each scarred by their own story, each standing straighter for the community they'd built. Constance looked between them, seeing something she couldn't understand. Women who'd chosen their own path, who didn't need men's approval or society's blessing. "This is madness," she sputtered. "You're throwing away respectability for what, this rough life, these fallen women." "We're not fallen," Clara said firmly. "We're rising, building something real while you cling to appearances." She gestured at the busy fair, their successful stall, the mountains rising behind. "This is my life now. These are my people, and you're not welcome in it." Constance's face went white with rage. "You'll regret this. James will file charges. Abandonment, theft. You'll be dragged back in chains if necessary." "Try it." Clara's smile was sharp as winter wind. "I have his letter. I have witnesses to my condition when he sent me away. I have records of every cent I took, what he gave me. Nothing more. And I have something else." She glanced at Elias. "A partner who knows these mountains like his own heartbeat. You send men after me, and we'll disappear so deep in the wilderness you'll think we were ghosts. By the time anyone finds us, if they do, I'll have established residency beyond any court's reach. You can't just disappear. Can't I? Clara stepped forward, and Constance retreated. I already did. The woman you knew, the one who made herself small for your son's comfort, she's gone, froze to death that first night on the mountain. What's left is someone you don't know, someone you can't control, someone who chooses her own path and walks it without apology. Constance looked to Elias. Last desperate attempt. Surely you, as a man, understand the importance of proper order, of wives obeying husbands, of... I understand partnership. Elias cut her off. Understand respect. Understand that the strongest steel comes from the hottest fire, and your son was too weak to handle what he had. His dark eyes held no compromise. Clara Malone is exactly where she belongs, with people who see her worth, value her strength, and if your son or any other man thinks different, they can discuss it with me. The threat lay gentle as snowfall, inevitable as avalanche. Constance clutched her traveling bag, looking suddenly old and uncertain. This isn't over, she managed. Yes, Clara said with finality. It is. Constance left on the afternoon stage, spine rigid with offended dignity. Clara watched her go, feeling the last chains of her old life snap and fall away. She'll make trouble, Sarah warned. Let her. Clara replied. We have law on our side. More important, we have each other. The fair continued around them, lively with spring energy. Their stall drew steady custom, word spreading about quality work and fair prices. Martha Henley stopped by, bringing news that 2 more women had written, seeking positions. Build careful, she advised. Too fast and foundations crack, but you're doing something needed here. Don't stop. As afternoon wore toward evening, Elias found Clara organizing their profits, planning expansions, always looking forward. You stood strong today, he said quietly, stronger than I've ever seen. Had good teachers, she replied, then met his eyes. And good reason. This life, these people, you worth fighting for, worth any scandal. Clara! He touched her face, gentle as he'd been with her that first dance. I need to say something. Should have said it sooner, but words come hard. You don't need words, I know. No, you deserve words. Deserve everything. He drew a breath. I love you. Not just as partner or friend. Love you complete, your steel, your fire, your refusal to shrink. Want to wake beside you every morning. Face whatever comes together. Build this life not just as business, but as everything. Clara's eyes burned with sudden tears. Elias Rourke, are you proposing? Doing it poor, probably, but yes. He pulled something from his pocket, a ring carved from antler, delicate despite his large hands. Made this during recovery. When you were out fetching Sarah, I knew I'd fight death itself to stay with you. So, will you have me? Not because anyone says we should, because we choose it. Yes. The word came instant. Sure. Yes to partnership, yes to building, yes to choosing each other every day. He slipped the ring on her finger, kissed her there in the middle of the fair with half the town watching. Let them see. Let them talk. Let them know that Clara Malone, soon to be Clara Rourke by choice, not obligation, had found her place and would hold it against all comers. That evening, the company gathered at the lodge for celebration. Sarah played fiddle while others danced. Stories were shared, plans made, dreams spoken into the firelight. Clara stood in the doorway, watching her chosen family, feeling Elias solid beside her. No longer small, he murmured, echo of the story's theme. Never again, she agreed. The mountains rose around them, ancient and enduring. In the lodge below, laughter rang out. Women who'd been told they were too much, not enough, fallen, forgotten, all finding their worth in shared work and mutual respect. Clara had climbed this mountain broken and desperate. She stood here now, whole and certain, surrounded by love she'd chosen, life she'd built, future she'd shaped with her own hands. The girl who'd tried to fit Chicago's narrow mold was gone. In her place stood Clara of the Mountain, hunter, trader, partner, friend. A woman who'd learned that sometimes you have to lose everything to find who you really are. And who she was, she knew now with bone-deep certainty, was exactly who she was meant to be. Strong, free, unashamed, unafraid. No longer small. Never again. Thank you so much for listening to this story, and I hope it touched your heart as much as it did mine. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss our thoughts about Clara and Elias's journey. If you enjoyed this tale, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850. Give this video a like, and don't forget to hit the hype button to help more people discover this story. Your support means everything, and I can't wait to share more tales from the American frontier with you.